Okay, so we are now live on YouTube and Bill Snavely is on his way and I will just share my laptop with him. We'll make it work.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, then why don't we go ahead and get started? And I will call our Tuesday, May 5th Oxford City Council meeting to order. Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Bracken,
Here.
Mr. Ellerby,
Here.
Mr. Prithridge,
Here.
Ms. Ragu,
Here.
Ms. Southard,
Here.
Mayor Smith.
Here. All right. Normally we do the Pledge of Allegiance, but because we're virtual tonight, we're going to forego the Pledge of Allegiance, but we all affirm the values stated within the Pledge of Allegiance. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion by Mr. Prithrick, second by Ms. Southard. Ms. Eaton, will you call the roll?
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. Okay, we're going to start tonight with public participation, and we're going to have a presentation on the city electric aggregation program, and I will turn it over to City Manager Elliott.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let me bring it up here and go to the, okay. Just give me a second. All righty. So, yes, I was asked by the Environmental Commission, Chantel had asked me to make a presentation on our electric aggregation program. So I'd like to go through this PowerPoint with you tonight on our electric aggregation program. And I want to share with you that joining us tonight is Jordan Harmon. He's with Affordable Gas and Electric. They're our broker for our program. So with that, let me go through this PowerPoint. And then at the end, we'd be glad to answer any questions you might have. It's very appropriate that we're doing this tonight because, as you know, we have on the agenda a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign a new 3-year contract for our program. So with that, let me go through the PowerPoint with you. So deregulation in Ohio gives consumers the ability to choose an energy supplier rather than having their energy provided by local utilities. In 2001, Senate Bill 3 went into effect, allowing Ohio consumers to compare electricity providers and choose a plan from a set of their providers. As you know, on November 4th, 2014, the City of Oxford voters authorized the creation of electric aggregation program. And of course, the program allows a local community, gives them buying power to get better rates for their program. City Council approved this plan of operation and governance. And then, as you know, we hired Eagle Energy LLC as the broker. And of course, now we have Affordable Gas and Electric. They purchased Eagle Energy some time ago. As you've heard me say before, basically under the deregulation in Ohio, consumers now have in Oxford 3 choices. Before we did the electric aggregation program, and before there was competition in Ohio, you only had one option, and that was to get your power from your electric utility, which ours is Duke Energy under their standard service offer. Under deregulation, then you also had the option of picking your own supplier, and PUCO has a very handy website to do that. It's an apples to apples comparison. And before the meeting, I looked online and there are 168 options that a consumer could pick. Now you can filter those options. For example, if you pick one with 75 to 100% renewable energy, that lowers the options. If you pick one with no termination fee, that lowers the options, so on and so forth. The third option now, because we have our program, is the City of Oxford Electric Aggregation Program, which, as we all know, is an opt-out program. All eligible customers are enrolled in the program unless they opt out. Our current rate presently, but we'll talk about that later under the agenda item, our current rate is 5.156 cents per kilowatt hour. And customers opt out at any time without a penalty. The city and AEP Energy send opt-out letters each fall to all eligible Duke customers. So customers receiving this opt-out letter, whether they're enrolled or not, may simply ignore the letter to remain on or enroll in the city program. And of course, as we all know, offers from other certified retail electric suppliers, CRES, may be received throughout the year by mail, telephone, or door-to-door solicitation. And I know for some people that's a little irritating, but that is part of the deregulation. Now, I did share with City Council that the PUCO does prevent door-to-door solicitation during the COVID-19 pandemic, but you can still receive telephone calls and mail solicitations. So the consumer needs to be careful before they act on those. It might be a variable rate, it might have penalties, so on and so forth. And of course, we prefer that they stay in our electric aggregation program. AEP, as I said earlier, is the city's current contracted provider, and they're responsible for purchasing 100% renewable power equivalent to the city's electric aggregation needs. AEP Energy then provides an environmental disclosure statement informing the city and enrolled customers that the equivalent power purchased is 100% wind-generated power sourced from the state of Texas. We also have a traditional program, and it's at 5.101 cents per kilowatt hour, and you have to opt in for that. So you must call AEP Energy if you want this traditional energy, i.e. fossil fuel. I also want to share with you that we've now included within the opt-out letter that goes out each fall, a cautionary statement regarding eligible customers who heat their homes with electricity may want to stay with Duke's standard service offer since they have a winter electric heating rate, which tends to be lower than the city's green electric aggregation rate. As you all know, with the bill, it has two major components. One is for distribution of electricity, and the other is for generation. If a customer is not on the city's electric aggregation program, and they haven't picked their own supplier, then both components are provided by Duke Energy, both the distribution and the generation. But if a customer is on the city's electric aggregation program, or they've picked their own supplier, then the distribution component is from Duke Energy, and the generation component is from AEP Energy, or some other supplier that they may have selected. So the second page of your bill has two boxes, and the top box shows your distribution charges, and the bottom box shows generation charges. Whether or not you're a customer of our electric aggregation program or another supplier, you still just receive one bill from Duke Energy. Here's a chart that shows the number of green residential customers under our program for the last 2 years. And you can see that our peak is in May. And of course, that coincides with having all the students on then. Students are a large customer base for us. And of course, our lowest months are as we're trying to get them on in the early and late fall. One of the questions that was asked is, where do we get our power? So this is for the state of Ohio. You might know, but Ohio is an importer of electricity. So we use the regional generation sources, and this is from PGM. And PGM is the interconnection. Basically, it's a regional transmission organization. They serve Ohio and 12 other states, plus Washington, D.C. PGM coordinates the movement of wholesale electricity. PGM operates a competitive wholesale electricity market and manages the high voltage electricity grid to ensure reliability for more than 65 million people. So this information is from their website. And as you can see from this chart, coal represents 24% in Ohio in 2019 of our electric generation. And I looked back in 2007, it was over about 84%. So over the last 12 years, the state of Ohio has seen many coal-fired plants retired. And so now the largest source is, as you can see from the chart, natural gas, followed by nuclear. And then we have 5% being renewable and 0.5% being other. And if we take a look then at renewables in Ohio, you can see that wind is the largest source. Then you have hydropower, biomass, and solar both at 0.5% each. And that gives you the full total of their 5% from that other chart. I want to just kind of share this chart with you as well. The energy market is changing, obviously, due to this COVID-19 crisis and other factors. But this first line chart on the left shows you the electricity generation by all fuels. And you can see that for 2020, coal basically is been dropping dramatically and will flatten out. And then what you see is renewables are climbing. And of course, this chart goes out to 2050, but that's the prediction, is that renewables at some point then will outstrip natural gas. And then if you look at the projection for renewables, and this comes from the US Energy Information Administration. They're a good source of information, statistics on energy usage within the United States. But you can see for renewables that hydro pretty much flattens out, geothermal's flattened out, but at about 2040, solar is predicted to overtake wind. And I might share with you that you may be aware that there are 2 solar farm projects that have been proposed in Preble County, Ohio. One is the Angelina project, and it's an 800 megawatt project with 800 acres of solar panels. The other is Alamo at 69.9 megawatts with 720 acres of solar panels. Both projects are being developed by Open Road Renewables of Austin, Texas, and the Ohio Power Siting Board, which has jurisdiction, has yet to issue a decision on both projects. Any project, any electric generation project, be it solar or natural gas, if it's over 50 megawatts, it has to go through the Ohio Power Siting Board. The short-term outlook, and of course, this is probably maybe a little dated, but basically you can see pricing, it's been relatively flat. And this is for the whole United States, the monthly residential electricity price. And this includes both transmission and distribution. And then the last bar chart there shows you the forecast for energy pricing. And, this may be off a little bit given the COVID-19 crisis. So with that, that's the end of my presentation, and Jordan and I would be glad to answer any questions you have about our electric aggregation program. Once again, Jordan represents Affordable Gas and Electric, our broker for our program. And I will go out of this screen so that we can see everybody. All phones here. Okay, questions?
All right, I think I saw Edna's hand first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask how the solar projects in Preble County that you mentioned would affect us. How would that affect our consumers? Or would it?
The proposal that we're going to talk about on our agenda, we're going to recommend a provider, and they're proposing to provide wind energy from Texas. But, all these solar projects are good. I guess I threw that in because it's very close to us. Maybe in the future, once they build it and it comes online, it might be a source of electricity for us, which might be much closer. If you followed it, I happen to have grown up in Preble County, and there's some opposition from area farmers. they're concerned about their land values decreasing with a project of this magnitude. And of course, they're concerned about the loss of some agricultural land. So we'll see what happens with the Power Siting Board, but with our existing program, we're proposing to use a supplier, and their source will be wind energy out of Texas.
Thank you.
Mhm. Other questions?
See Mr. Bracken? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering how the program would interact if we should ever do, the city of Oxford, a solar energy project or something similar.
Good question. I mean, it depends on the scale of the project. You know, I didn't share with you our energy demand, you know, but it's fairly significant for the entire city. You know, once again, it would depend on the size of our project. If it's a small project that, you know, might provide power to one or two buildings, you know, as you know, we have a separate contract for the energy for the city's facilities, separate from this proposal tonight that's on the agenda.
I may add there to Doug's comments. We've had discussions with multiple suppliers, and there will be a time in the future, and maybe not the so far out future, where the aggregation program is supplied by a locally sourced solar farm or renewable energy technology that's locally based, either just outside of the city or within the county somewhere. That is something that a lot of these suppliers have looked at. We've had discussions with multiple ones that say that they're not too far from it, and those would change the kind of aggregation programs in a little bit of a sense, where they would be 15 to 25 year agreements on purchasing the electricity. Of course, the opt-out program functioning would still remain the same. Residents could come in and out of that, but that's not too far off. And of course, we do business in both Ohio and Illinois, and Illinois being a little bit more of a liberal state, has kind of incentivized solar projects. And if that catches on in Ohio, it just speeds that timeline up even more.
Oh yeah, and I just want to make a comment. This is a wonderful program that the Environmental Commission kind of nudged council to do a number of years ago, and I'm glad we're continuing it. I think we've often framed it in terms of saving money for consumers, which I think is really, it's benefited consumers. I'm a person who looks at the future, and as scary as the COVID-19 crisis is, our climate challenge is a challenge of greater magnitude, both in terms of the planet and human life. So I think that like this transition was really, really important, and we need to stick with it. Hopefully our model can encourage Miami to also considering swapping out its energy supplies from fossil fuels. And I guess this is a question, this program really applies to residential customers. So how do we encourage some of our large consumers? I understand they're not part of this. So whether it's a manufacturing facility or a hospital, how do we bring those folks on into the renewable energy world that we're in?
We do have some business customers that are on it, but it's limited to a certain demand. And off the top of my head, I don't have that in front of me. But go ahead.
It's 700,000 kilowatt hours consumed on an annual basis or less. Those business customers can participate in the aggregation program. Anything above that, they're on their own to solicit energy prices from retail suppliers, and it's their discretion to choose those renewable energy options or not.
So I guess it's just a comment. I think it's going to be part of our work where, as we get the climate energy steering committee together, I think we need to somehow reach out to some of those large customers and I guess just encourage them, because they could purchase from these same suppliers, right? You know, they have a choice. Absolutely. Also, and so hopefully they will also make the right choice like we've done. So thank you.
Yeah. And I'd be remiss if we didn't also give credit to the League of Women Voters, not only the Environmental Commission, but the League of Women Voters was very supportive.
I saw Edna's hand. You have another question?
I was going to, of course, say that the League of Women Voters had initiated it, and I'm glad to hear you acknowledge that, Doug. But I also want to say that if you have, if residents have solar panels on their homes, that, or on their roofs, that makes no difference, and you can still be part of aggregation. And of course, I have solar panels on my roof, and I'm glad to participate in that.
All right. I thought I saw Councilor Ragu's hand.
Yeah, Jordan, thank you so much for coming. I think this is so complicated. I try to educate myself, and when we talk about the Environmental Commission, it's such a complex thing. So I really appreciate your time and being here. I know this is something we've been wanting for months now. Can you explain the difference between because whenever the conversation would be brought up about bringing renewable energy locally, there seems to be some resistance because there's confusion about, well, what's the difference? Because if we have this aggregation program, what's the point? Why do you need local renewable energy? And how is it that the electron from the wind energy in Texas how does it make it to us? And what's the big deal about it being more local? Why is that the future?
Well, the reason for that is the current process is the purchase of renewable energy certificates. So you don't have a way of knowing where the energy is actually coming from. I mean, we know that we're purchasing renewable energy certificates from wind power through the state of Texas, but because the physical electricity that we receive through the utility grid doesn't indicate its origin, that kind of presents a little bit of a challenge. And of course, we do see projects coming online locally or being discussed locally, like Mr. Elliott alluded to earlier. And those things will continue to happen. And it just says a lot about the community. It says a lot about everybody. If you can point to something on the side of the highway or just outside of town that says, hey, that's our piece. Our community is doing our part to combat climate change and other sources that are really just, we're doing our part to help combat the challenges that the world is facing in regards to energy and carbon pollution.
And what is Doug, I know you know a lot about kind of energy brokering just from your past jobs, but what would the process be if Oxford were to undergo its own project like this? Because obviously Preble County does this, other cities in Ohio do it. How does that work politically with our grid and the way energy is brokered?
Well, as you know, we've talked about doing a smaller project. You know, the projects that I mentioned in Preble County are pretty big projects, but a smaller one to maybe serve part of our needs. We've talked about trying to look at the landfill and maybe doing a solar project there or on some other land that the city owns. You know, Mike has been talking to Ohio EPA about that. You know, we do monitoring now of the landfill, the monitoring wells there, but I know in other states, they've allowed solar projects to be built on closed landfills. And, you know, hopefully we can encourage EPA to allow us to do something like that. You know, it all gets down to, you know, how big a project we want to do and how we're going to finance that. You know, I like this program, and we all recognize that unless we're off the grid and supplying 100% of our own power, we're going to be getting power from other sources. And if every community had an electric aggregation program and demanded renewable energy, which of course they can't do right now. You saw the generation, but it's changing. I sent out a report that Duke Energy mailed that talks about, their strategy, and they're closing down all these investor-owned utilities are closing coal-fired plants. Number one, it's hard to meet the EPA emission standards, and more communities and customers are demanding clean energy. So, I think trend is clear. It's unfortunate that the state of Ohio reduced our standards. I think it was going to be 24%, and they reduced it down to 12% needed to be renewable energy. But, I think we'll continue to have this discussion and maybe be able to do a project. Mike has even talked to folks at Miami about maybe doing a project together. And, I think the future is bright. And I applaud the city council for enacting this program here in Oxford. It's a good program and allows the citizens to get a little lower price than they might be able to get on their own.
And Ms. Ragu, I'll just kind of go a little bit further on Doug's comments. Smaller scale projects are known as behind the meter. So they're still tied into the grid. The electricity you generate from your solar panels on your home or your business go into your facility when you're using, and then if you're overproducing, say during the prime time hours of the middle of the day, that energy gets put on the grid. Of course, you get credit for that energy that you're putting on the grid, and then there's the net metering, so it's offsetting the kilowatt hours you're pulling in. On the aggregation front, these programs that we've talked with suppliers about, that they're not quite there yet, but in the next maybe 5 to 10 years, we're going to be seeing suppliers actually financing and building the solar farms for these aggregation programs themselves. So it won't be at a cost to the city. And then the city is just going to be contracted with that supplier to purchase the energy generated from those solar panels for anywhere from a 15 to 25 year period.
Jordan, I want to ask you a question. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sure.
With cities you represent, how many of them are asking for 100% renewable energy in their aggregation programs?
Currently, we do. So in Ohio, we represent 33 communities on aggregation. Oxford and Springdale are the two communities that do 100% renewable. There are a handful of others that have the traditional power as the opt-in portion, but then have a 100% renewable opt-in rate that's available for their residents. And then over in Illinois, we do 100 communities. In the more conservative area of Southern Illinois, one of those communities does 100% renewable. That's Carbondale, Illinois, home of Southern Illinois University. Carbondale, Illinois, while I mention it, we actually just, as a company, Affordable Gas and Electric, we actually wrote and administered an RFP to provide solar for their wastewater treatment plant, their police station, and their civic center. So we have experience doing those kind of things. An off note, small scale solar projects, we also build those ourselves. So this is something that we are very invested in, and we certainly look forward to the future working with you guys on this.
All right, let me get Mr. Snavely. He's joined the meeting and he has a question.
Thanks. This is a quick one, Doug. There was a bullet point on one of those slides, and I just wanted to clarify that citizens will be on this program unless they opt out. So
Right.
they do not have to affirmatively opt in. Is that correct?
That's right. And since we're changing suppliers in the early fall, we'll be asking for a list from Duke Energy, and everyone will get a letter basically saying, here's our program. You're included in it unless you opt out. So they can just disregard the letter. Now, I will share with you, when we first got into this program, I had a half a dozen residents that came in and were very unhappy with the fact that they had to take action to get out of the program. But that's what the voters voted on. That's what we proposed, was an opt-out program. So you're exactly right. They'll be included unless they opt out.
Okay, and I just hope that we are really clear with our communication, because there's a lot of energy companies who send mailers to people saying, hey, we're renewable if you want to get your energy from us. And it's confusing for a lot of the residents.
There's a lot of folks that also, a lot of energy companies that, of course, not during the COVID crisis, but before that, would come door to door or make phone calls. Those folks sometimes present themselves as part of the city's program, which is completely false. I just want to make sure that residents understand the city's aggregation program. Nobody will ever call you. Nobody will ever come to your door asking you to sign up for the city's program. All communications are done via mail. And just to clarify one thing as well, the opt-out mailers, when they go out to residents and eligible businesses, they only go to those who are eligible. So examples of folks who may not be eligible for the aggregation are a resident who has signed a contract on their own with a retail electric supplier, either through the Apples to Apples website or a mailer or something of that nature. They do not qualify for the opt-out portion because we do not know the terms of their contract and whether they have termination fees associated with their contract. I also want to add that the aggregation program never will have an early termination fee. So if there's ever a scenario where, you know, we're in a 3-year contract and on the back half of that, either Duke's rate, another supplier's rate offer becomes better and lower than what the city's aggregation program is, residents would have the ability to opt out without any penalty and go choose a lower rate.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so my only point was, let's be really clear in our communication. I think we have to make it crystal clear to the people what's going on, because I've heard more things about their confusion on that than almost anything. And Jessica did a great job last year in one of her missives that she puts out, but I think we need to do that again.
Yeah, you know, in that one slide, you can just throw away those other offers, but you know, that's up to the consumer, caveat emptor. I mean, one of the apples to apples suppliers that had 100% renewable energy had an outrageous price. And one last thing, if indeed after this COVID-19 crisis, they're allowed to go door to door again, you can simply ask them for their license, because we had a vendor a couple of years ago that was going door to door asking to see people's electric bill, and they were not licensed, and we quickly put a stop to that. So, you know, it's deregulated. They have the right to go and send you mailers with other offers, but you need to read the fine print very carefully. Could have a penalty, rate could be higher than ours, could be variable rate, so on and so forth. So yes. Thank you.
All right, I saw Mr. Prithrick had a question. Do you still have something?
Yeah, just for bottom line, if a resident asks the question, okay, I turn on my light in my house, I'm part of the opt-in program, is my electricity carbon neutral? That's kind of a basic question. Is that the case, Jordan, that if I use electricity in my house, can I be confident my electricity is carbon neutral?
Well, as I said before, there's no way to tell where the physical electricity that you're receiving at your home, what its origin was. The renewable energy credits that the city is purchasing or is contracting for is being placed onto the grid, but it's impossible to tell
No, I know. I mean, that's the nature, but I think that if we were to do, and I know we're doing an inventory right now, a carbon inventory, I'm assuming that if you're purchasing renewable energy credits, it doesn't count against you as consumption of fossil fuels. I mean, our electricity dollars are purchasing wind power, right? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
okay.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. I just wanted to add that I guess read in the newspaper today that for the last 40 days in the United States, renewables have exceeded coal. So I think people can be confident their dollars are supporting wind farms. So.
All right, I got one more question from Councilor Ragu. And then we'll come back to you, Jason.
Yeah, I just have two things. I mean, I think everyone can agree this is a really good program that everyone feels really positive about, and it's a step in the right direction. I think that the important thing is highlighting what RECs are, the renewable energy certificates, what its limitations are, the fact that it's a baby step towards having clean energy generated locally so that we can guarantee that that electron that's coming through our wall is actually renewable. So I think that this is such an important step. And of course, this is a great idea, but not to stop there and to keep going and making progress. And I think the other thing that Doug had mentioned earlier, that some farmers had complained about devaluation of their land, especially during this time whenever farmers are struggling, they've actually found an ability to supplement their income on the federal program that allows them to receive subsidies. I don't know if that's the right word, receive subsidies if they have solar or wind on their farmland. So it actually can be a really positive thing for farmers. And I know a lot of farmers who welcome it.
Yeah.
All right. Councilor Bracken has a question.
Hello, sort of a statement, sort of a question. My understanding of RECs are that, I mean, the big question we want to answer is not necessarily, is our energy renewable? It's, is our purchase of RECs increasing the amount of renewable energy that the world has? And the answer to that is really complicated from my understanding. At the very least, it incentivizes renewable energy, but it doesn't inherently make more renewable energy. For example, you could have a glut on the market of RECs to purchase. And so your purchasing them might actually not induce more renewable energy to be created that would have been created otherwise. So that's why, even though this is a great program, it definitely helps. I think it's a smaller step in the right direction. And at least for me, I would like to see us move forward with not even a smaller solar project, but a much larger project.
Yeah, got it. You know, I didn't want to get into the RECs because we're not buying them, but the provider that's, you know, they're providing us this certificate because, as you know, there's a market. This is a commodity, these RECs, and they're bought and sold. So you won't see in our proposal a certain amount of money to buy these RECs. That's between the utility generator and the buyer of that. We're indirectly a buyer with our program. I mean, if you look at tax credits, you know, they also incentivize renewable energy, but, you know, the energy itself and then the REC. So I didn't really want to, because it is complicated, you know, and I don't want to profess to know it all. But I think we all agree this is a program and that, you know, there are some other things that we need to be looking into and we will. And, you know, and that's why I asked Jordan how many other communities are doing this, because I think we're having an effect. And if more communities demanded this, then the generators would have to respond more so. But I get it. There are critics of the RECs and that, you know, they're not really doing the projects, let's say. But I think the chart that I showed earlier in the PowerPoint demonstrates that there are changes that are coming, maybe not fast enough.
All right. Well, if there are no more questions, I'd like to thank Mr. Harmon for being with us tonight. It was helpful.
And Jordan is going to stay with us when we get to the.
Sure. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All right. Normally, we would move on to public comments, but I hear that there are no public comments tonight. All right, we have no public comments, so we will move on to the consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? I see Mr. Snavely's hand as a motion and Mr. Pithrick as a second. Any items to be removed from the agenda tonight? Seeing none, I will ask Ms. Eaton to call the roll.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu.
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes,
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right. We will move on to resolutions. Ms. Eaton, if you will read the first resolution, please, or the first title of the first resolution.
A resolution condemning hate speech and discrimination in the city of Oxford, Ohio.
All right, we have a motion to adopt. I think I saw Mr. Snavely's hand.
So moved.
And a
Trying to
second,
get to my mute button.
okay, and a second from Councilor Bracken.
Sounds good.
All right. Trying to see, okay, do we have anyone from staff like to comment on this? If not, will move to the petition, the petitioners of the resolution for discussion and comment. Council comment? Wait, Bill, you're back on mute. You were off mute. You're back on mute.
I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
So I think we should just pass it. It's something that I think we all believe in.
Yes, I think this is a great resolution and I thank you all for putting it together. So I think it's really good. All right, no further discussion. Ms. Eaton, will you call the roll, please?
Can I just make a comment just because I know not everyone may have read the resolution or if there are people watching on YouTube, but it's basically discussing discrimination and xenophobia and racism that has been really brought even more so to the surface and magnified because of the pandemic, not only with Asian Americans or AAPI people, but also African American community who are dying their mortality rate is 6 times that of a white person, and that people of color are really taking a hard hit. And this is something that we can do something about from a policy level, whether it's local, state, or federal, and that we have the ability to look at the policy that we're putting forward and making sure that we are leading with equality, and we're making sure that we're trying to always push towards progress to make things as fair as possible, because that is not the way things always have been or are. So the important things of this is really encouraging, Governor DeWine is doing such an amazing job. I think we can only sing high praises of him, but also not only has he established a task force to evaluate how people of color might be affected, but really pushing towards tangible things that can be done. So not only does our council condemn hate speech and discrimination within our city, but we also support the Ohio legislature to pass the state Senate resolution number 12, denouncing all forms of stigmatization, racism, and discrimination occurring as a result of this pandemic, that we call upon the Ohio legislature to support passage of Senate Bill 98 to establish and fund the Ohio AAPI Public Affairs Commissions, and that we call upon the Ohio Department of Health and local public health departments to incorporate anti-racism messaging and outreach to impacted communities. Something very simple that can be done is, it's a very scary time where information is changing so quickly. Something that, I think that the city is trying to grapple with in a very simplistic way is making sure that we are communicating in as many languages as possible that our community might need. So there's a lot that we can do from our local level and, pushing the state to do as much as they can as well.
Perfect. Great summation. I really appreciate that. All right. Okay, Ms. Eaton, I guess we're ready for the roll call now. Thank you.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes,
Mr. Bracken,
Yes,
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right, that resolution is adopted. All right, we'll go to our second resolution. Ms. Eaton, if you will read that, please.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Energy Harbor LLC for the procurement of electricity generation for the city of Oxford's electric aggregation program for a period of 36 months.
All right, may I have a motion to adopt?
so moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Southard, second by Mr. Ellerby. All right, Mr. Elliott?
Thank you. Well, as you remember from the PowerPoint, our current provider for our electric aggregation program is AEP Energy, and the contract will expire with the December 2020 billing cycle. In order to secure updated rates, proposals were requested from 5 companies for the city's program. 4 certified residential electric suppliers responded on April 20th. That were AEP Energy, Energy Harbor, Constellation, and Dynegy. We updated pricing for today's council meeting, and I'll share that with you later. And only 3 companies provided pricing: AEP Energy, Energy Harbor, and Constellation. So the pricing from Energy Harbor LLC was the lowest and best pricing for each contract term length, 1, 2, and 3 years. I'm recommending tonight that we enter into a 3-year agreement with Energy Harbor LLC. And the recommended proposal, as you know, is for 100% renewable energy for our opt-out program. The 36-month rate then quoted for this evening, and this will be inserted within the contract, is 4.71 cents per kilowatt hour. And that's slightly up from what was written in my report. And we also have a rate for the traditional power, which is 4.62 cents per kilowatt hour. And as I mentioned earlier, the current rate is 5.15 cents per kilowatt hour for renewable and 5.101 cents per kilowatt hour for traditional energy. Now, the annual savings to an electric consumer, assuming one uses 9,000 kilowatt hours per year, is $40.14 with this slight increase. I had written $47.34. So this is the annual savings. It's not great, but it is a savings and it is lower. If you compare it to Duke's current price to compare, which they're required to put now on the bills, the annual savings would be $106.20 with these rates. Their present price to compare is 5.89 cents per kilowatt hour. So with that, Jordan, I would be glad to answer any questions you have, and I would recommend adoption of this resolution this evening.
All right. I see Mr. Bracken's hand up. Go ahead.
yeah, I was just wondering how the prices compared for a 1 and 2 year versus the 3-year contract.
Okay, the pricing that we received this evening for a 1-year contract, and let's just use the green energy, is 4.93 cents per kilowatt hour. For 2 years, it's 4.82 cents per kilowatt hour. And once again, for 3 years, it's 4.71 cents per kilowatt hour. So slight increase as you go with the shorter term each year.
Yeah, so I'm a fan of the program, obviously. I was just wondering if 3 years was the best option. I know we have savings over 3 years versus 1 or 2, but also the projections are that renewable energy will obviously be more efficient and cheaper going forward. But of course, that's hard to project. So just something I've been thinking on, something to take into consideration.
All right. Anybody else? Okay.
And I might add that our last several agreements were for 3 years. And as Jason said, I mean, who knows for sure what the market's going to do. And once again, even though the electric aggregation program is locked in, if the consumers can find a better deal for renewable energy in the apples to apples comparison, they could opt out. I know Jordan doesn't want me hear me saying that, but they can do that if they wish. So
That's the beautiful part of these aggregation programs. It's an option for your residents, but it's not something that is mandated where they have to take it. They can shop around and do their due diligence.
All
thank
right.
you, Jason.
Okay, Ms. Eaton, if you will please call the roll.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
yes,
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right, that resolution is adopted.
Thank you.
We will move on to our third resolution of the night. So please read that, Ms. Eaton. You get a chance.
Resolution of council authorizing the city manager to submit a grant application to the Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana Regional Council of Governments requesting funding from the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program and authorizing the city manager to secure through property tax levy funds a 32% local match for the engineering, design, and construction of the Oxford area trail system from Puffer Park to the Talawanda Middle School.
All right, may I have a motion to adopt?
so moved.
All right, motion to adopt by Ms. Southard, second by Mr. Prithrick. And is this Ms. Green tonight?
Yes.
All right,
I'm going to do a screen share with you to show you where we're talking about. So this is the map that we are talking about doing, and you can see that we are talking about going from Puffer Park here, if you can see where this orange line is, over to Kerr Road, and then continuing on over to Talawanda Middle School, which is here. And it will also include this connection up to Chestnut Street, which is where the Butler Regional Transit Authority will have their new hub, and also hopefully Amtrak will be. So this is this pink part is a really important part of the grant from a transportation and a multimodal perspective. This is a large grant. We're going for a surface transportation block grant, which is usually for roads and highways, but it does allow for applications to be for bike and pedestrian projects as well. They're typically not as competitive, but they allow you to go up to $6 million, whereas a bike, and it's called Transportation Alternatives Grant, which is just for bike projects, is only $750,000, which wouldn't allow us to really do these segments. So I called OKI and I spoke with them and I said, is it worthwhile applying? And he said, if you have a match and it's a strong project, go ahead, throw your hat in the ring. And they also feel like with the fear in the economy right now that it might be less competitive than perhaps in the past. So I feel like it's worthwhile to throw our hat in the ring. If we are awarded, the funds would be released in the year 2024, and the construction can be in 24 and 25. So that's the years that we'd be looking at. We're definitely looking ahead. Any questions on the location? Can't see.
let me see, let me help you out there.
Okay. And then I also just wanted to go through the budget just quickly with you. So this is, you can see here what we're looking at. The total grant amount, the total construction amount would be this 4.8 million. We would be requesting $3,290,521. And I'm recommending a 32% match you get a lot of points, the more match dollars you throw in. And so that's my strategy. And the required match would be $1,548,481. With this being in the year 2024, I believe that we will have enough levy funds to help us out. The fund, you can see here each year, I have to slide it over a little bit, but each year it builds up. And this would be the planning year, the year that the grant would come in. And this would be the year that the construction was complete. It gets us way down there, but then the following year, the levy starts to rebuild. And this is with us pulling out savings each year. So I feel like we have some wiggle room if needed. And this is just the amount, again, that we're looking at for this grant. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I see Mr. Prithrick's hand.
So just a first question, I guess, and then a comment is, I'm anticipating, and a lot of people are anticipating, stimulus dollars focused on infrastructure coming out of an additional COVID relief package in the future. Is this the kind of, how does this position us if, for example, stimulus dollars become available? If you have a grant application in, does it mean you can't go for those, or?
That's a good question. No, I think any shovel-ready project that we have would be eligible for future stimulus dollars. So while it might not be exactly this part, it might be another segment, or it might be, let's imagine that this railroad crossing gets really expensive and we need more dollars. As long as you're allowed to apply for it, we could, or we can turn our attention to other segments that we have already in the works.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Seeing no other questions, Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll on this?
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Reagan,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes, that resolution is adopted. So we will move on to ordinances. We have no first readings tonight, but quite a few second readings. So Ms. Eaton, whenever you're ready to start with the second reading.
An ordinance adopting Oxford Codified Ordinance, Chapter 1148, entitled Landscaping and Tree Preservation.
May I have a motion to adopt? I see Mr.
So
Snavely
moved.
and Mr. Prithrick, I think, got in the second. So then I will turn this over to Mr. Perry.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks. So no changes since the last time, but for the public or anyone who's interested, this is the tail end of a many-year process that originated from not only a goal of the comprehensive plan back in 2008, but also some interest from neighbors of a development to be more thoughtful about when development is done, particularly residential development, how the existing trees in the area are treated. And so this came out of the Planning Commission most recently, but then originally started in the Environmental Commission back in 2017. And so after a couple-year process of Environmental Commission review with staff, ended up in the Planning Commission's purview within the past year, and went through several iterations there. So I'll share my screen and kind of walk you through a much briefer version than last time of the zoning code text amendments for tree protection and preservation. So I'll skip the slide that went over the history. And for the public's benefit, our current code does not address some of these conditions when it comes to commercial developments or even when a residential subdivision is done, there aren't any details that specify how trees should be accounted for or considered when a development is done. So by and large, most people realize that trees are valuable for development, and they're an asset for the owners of the land who eventually own the lots. But without a way to document that, it's been hard for decision makers to feel comfortable with, is what's being done here right? So Oxford is a tree city. We plant a lot of trees ourselves. So this is a good balance and way to look at this that kind of addresses both the economic development side of things, but also the environment in a way that's balanced. So this latest iteration did consider trees that are being preserved as counting toward the overall requirement, as well as the trees that are planted along the street that are street trees. And so that's looked at in a more holistic way than what some of the original versions were. What this is not is a tree ordinance that addresses trees that homeowners may want to remove or trim on a private property. So it's only triggered by a development review or building permit application, something like that. So this is a chapter list. This is the main chapter. This is the new chapter that will be created that everything will refer to. And this is applicability. So it does not address single family, 2-family, or 3-family dwellings that are existing, but it would new. And the uptown area is exempt from that area. And another one that was new within the past year that was added was the existing developments that may have expansion. So if you looked at the code, you might have seen that, well, what if a business is expanding into an area or a parking lot is expanding into an area that's wooded? So if it's a small expansion, then it's exempt. If it's a larger expansion, then this idea of what trees are there and should they be preserved comes into play. And I'll just skip to the graphics that will be included. So of course, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and this gives you a little bit of a flavor of what is going to be added into the code. So for contractors and developers that are doing construction for trees that are going to be preserved, this is the standard that they'll be held to protect them so that they're not damaged in the field, the ones that are intended to be protected. And this will end up within the construction drawings for the excavators. And then we also created a tree survey. We based it on a drawing that was done for a project up around Columbus, and we got the consultant to adapt it for our needs and give us some examples of just what does a tree survey look like. This was a little bit of a sticking point previously for the development community as well. What do you want? How do you want us to show that? So we just decided to put it within the code as an example. And the slide here just talks about the option for if trees cannot be planted for whatever reason, then the applicant could invest into a tree fund, which that fee ordinance hasn't been set up yet, but that could be done later this fall. And like I said, the Planning Commission recommendation was to approve the conditions that were requested by Mr. Wright Gwynn were already adapted and put into the code that you have before you first reading and second reading tonight. Other than the actual fee itself is not, because that'd be a separate ordinance. And that's all I have for you. Happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you much for that recap. Open it up for council discussion or questions. All right, I think I see Ms. Southard's hand.
I just want to say thank you for all the work that many people have put into this. You especially, Sam, but 2 commissions that went through a lot of study, and the results are just, I'm impressed. And I think it's a very good step for our community, since we are trees. And of course, trees are important for the environment. And that also fits in with our goal of protecting the environment and the climate.
All right. Mr. Prithrick?
Yeah, just to reiterate what Councilor Southard said, which is that I'm reading the staff report. I think we all know we love trees, and Oxford is a tree city. I think that this goes along with the electric aggregation and renewable energy credits. I think that maintaining our urban forests to the degree we have them, planting trees, is a part of offsetting the emissions that we have. And so I think that this is part of a whole piece of thinking holistically about it and balanced with development. I look forward to developers having to make that choice about how to protect forests and where to concentrate development on those less sensitive areas that we just didn't have before. So thanks to staff and everybody on that.
All right, if there's no further discussion, Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes,
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right, that ordinance is adopted. Now, just to remind everybody, we had to change several places in the code for this, so this will be a long string of code changes in various places. So, Ms. Eaton, when you get a chance, please read our second reading of the evening.
An ordinance repealing Oxford Codified Ordinance, Sections 1101.4400, General Statement, 1101.4403, Typical Sections, and 1101.4410, Landscape Plan, and Chapter 1101 entitled Subdivision Regulations, and adopting new Oxford Codified Ordinance, Sections 1101.4400, General Statement, 1101.4403, Typical Sections, and 1101.4410 entitled Landscape Plan, and Chapter 1101 entitled Subdivision Regulations, to be in compliance with Chapter 1148 of the Oxford Codified Ordinances entitled Landscaping and Tree Preservation.
All right, may I have a motion to adopt? I see Mr. Snavely. Do I have a second? From Mr. Prithrick. All right. Mr. Perry, anything else to add to this one?
No, thank you.
All right. Any questions from council? All right. Then Ms. Eaton, you can call the roll when you're ready.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
yes,
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. That ordinance is adopted as well. All right. We will move on to our second reading, also part of the tree ordinance. So Ms. Eaton, when you get a chance.
An ordinance repealing Oxford Codified Ordinance Sections 1143.03C13 Landscaping, 1143.05C13 Landscaping, and 1143.07D13 entitled Landscaping, and Chapter 1143 entitled Districts, and adopting new Oxford Codified Ordinance Sections 1143.03C13 Landscaping, 1143.05C13 Landscaping, and 1143.07D13 Landscaping, and Chapter 1143 entitled Districts, to be in compliance with Chapter 1148 of the Oxford Codified Ordinances entitled Landscaping and Tree Preservation.
All
Move
right.
adoption.
Adoption by Mr. Snavely. Do I see a second? I see Mr. Prithrick as a second. Mr. Perry, anything to add to this one?
I was just going to add that we went to a lot of effort to save paper by making these, trying to consolidate these and not have the entire chapters of the code, but then we ended up not having in-person meetings, so it's kind of a letdown. But thank you. I just thought you would enjoy that that little story, how much paper we tried to save on a tree ordinance.
Yes, absolutely. All right. If there are any council questions on this one? All right, seeing none, Ms. Eaton, you can call the roll when you're ready.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
yes,
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes, that ordinance is adopted as well. We will move on to our fourth second reading. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Eaton.
An ordinance repealing Oxford Codified Ordinance Sections 1143.12 D2 landscaping and 1143.16 D entitled Supplementary Regulations and Chapter 1143 entitled Districts, and adopting new Oxford Codified Ordinance Sections 1143.12 D2 entitled Landscaping and 1143.16 D entitled Supplementary Regulations and Chapter 1143 entitled Districts, to be in compliance with Chapter 1148 of the Oxford Codified Ordinances entitled Landscaping and Tree Preservation.
Move adoption.
Second. Second by Ms. Southard. All right. Mr. Perry, anything to add?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any council discussion? All right, seeing none. Ms. Eaton, you may call the roll when you're ready.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
yes,
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes, that ordinance is adopted. All right, we will move on to our fifth second reading. Ms. Eaton, if you will please read that.
An ordinance repealing Oxford Codified Ordinance Sections 1145.01A entitled Purpose, 1145.05A entitled Preliminary Plan, and 1145.06B entitled General Decision Standards, and Chapter 1145 entitled Planned Developments, and adopting new Oxford Codified Ordinance Sections 1145.01A Purpose, 1145.05A entitled Preliminary Plan, and 1145.06B entitled General Decision Standards, and Chapter 1145 Planned Developments, to be in compliance with Chapter 1148 of the Oxford Codified Ordinances entitled Landscaping and Tree Preservation.
Move adoption.
second,
Second by Ms. Southard. Anything to add to this one, Mr. Perry?
No, thank you.
All right. Any council discussion? All right, seeing none, Ms. Eaton, you may call the roll when you're ready.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
yes,
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes, that ordinance is adopted. We will move on to our sixth second reading of the evening. Ms. Eaton, you may read it whenever you're ready.
An ordinance repealing Oxford Codified Ordinance Sections 1147.02A1, contents of application for conditional use permit, and 1147.02C2 entitled General Decision Standards, and Chapter 1147 entitled Conditional Uses, and adopting new Oxford Codified Ordinance Sections 1147.02A1 entitled Contents of Application for Conditional Use Permit, and 1147.02C2 entitled General Decision Standards, to be in compliance with Chapter 1148 of the Oxford Codified Ordinances entitled Landscaping and Tree Preservation.
Move adoption.
Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Southard. Anything to add, Mr. Perry? Nothing to add. Any council discussion? All right, seeing none, Ms. Eaton, you may call the roll when you're ready.
Ms. Southard,
yes,
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes, that ordinance is adopted. We'll move on to our seventh second reading of the evening. Ms. Eaton, you may read it whenever you're ready.
An ordinance repealing Oxford Codified Ordinance Section 1149.05E6 entitled Landscaping, and Chapter 1149 entitled Parking and Site Access, and adopting new Oxford Codified Ordinance section 1149.05E6, landscaping, in chapter 1149 entitled Parking and Site Access, to be in compliance with chapter 1148 of the Oxford Codified Ordinances entitled Landscaping and Tree Preservation.
Move adoption.
Seconded.
Second by Ms. Southard. Mr. Perry, anything to add to this one? Seeing none. Any council discussion? Seeing none. Ms. Eaton, you may call the roll whenever you're ready.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. Ordinance is adopted. We will move on to our 8th second reading of the night. And Ms. Eaton, you may read it whenever you're ready.
An ordinance adopting additional exhibits into attachment H entitled Typical Section Drawings in Part 11, Title 1 of the Oxford Codified Ordinances, to be in compliance with Chapter 1148 of the Oxford Codified Ordinances entitled Landscaping and Tree Preservation.
Move adoption.
Do you have a second?
Seconded.
Second by Ms. Southard. Anything to add, Mr. Perry?
No, thank you.
All right. Any council discussion? Seeing none. Ms. Eaton, you may call the roll whenever you're ready.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right. That concludes all the sections of the tree ordinance that we needed to add. We will move on to our 9th second reading tonight. Ms. Eaton, you may read it whenever you're ready.
An ordinance accepting the recommendation of the Planning Commission and approving the final planned development application for South Farm Section 4 with conditions.
Move adoption.
Do you have a second?
Seconded.
Second by Ms. Southard. Mr. Perry?
Thank you again. No changes since the first reading. I'll do another summary of the next 3 items on the agenda. So this is the development proposed by 2 property owners, as well as Bear Becker Engineers, John Bear, who's on the line, I believe, as well. So I'll share my screen and I'll start with the recommendation from Planning Commission for the approval of the planned development, and then the right-of-way vacation for the relocation of the right-of-way because of Hoover Drive, and then the approval of actually the dividing of the land. So we've got these all on the same agenda for your convenience. And I'll put this on here. So this, sorry for the flashing of the screen there. This is the actually the final plat showing, if you can see my cursor, this is the area for the development. That is 25 lots adjacent to existing Morgan Circle. Originally, it was platted as 13 lots and was not developed. So it has been laying dormant, if you will. This property owner has acquired some land from the adjacent property owner of the church in order to assemble enough land to have a planned development that meets the minimum requirements for open space. It also is a more dense development than the underlying zoning would have allowed. However, through the planned development process, that is perfectly legal to grant those waivers, do it in a way that is consistent with the area. And for just an overview with the context of the aerial photography, you can see how that is laid out. In order for the plan to take place, there had to be a shift of the right-of-way. So this is the existing Hoover Drive right-of-way that in order for the geometry to work, council has to pass or approve an ordinance to adjust that land that is owned by the public in order to make that work. So you see these shaded areas where that adjustment would occur. And that allows that final step of the final plat to be recorded along with the understanding that when the road is built, there will be financial security that is held by the city until that roadway, that public infrastructure is completed. So the staff reviewed this, the planning commission had reviewed it twice through the preliminary and the final. And with the planning commission's recommendation and the council's approval, this would allow the developer to move forward with the construction and the bonding on their timeline. And that's a summary that I have for you. Happy to answer any questions.
All right. Council questions or discussion? All right, I think we all remember this from 2 weeks ago, and there are no further questions. Ms. Eaton, you may call the roll whenever you're ready.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
yes,
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. Ordinance is adopted. All right, we will move on to the 10th second reading of the night. Ms. Eaton, you can read it whenever you're ready.
An ordinance vacating right-of-way associated with Roberts Drive and Hoover Drive as was previously dedicated by OR 7959, page 1551, replat for South Farm Section 2 and 2A.
Move adoption.
We have a second? Second by Ms. Southard. Mr. Perry has already reviewed this. Do I have any council questions or discussion on this section? Seeing none, Ms. Eaton, you can call the roll whenever you're ready.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
yes,
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. That ordinance is adopted. All right, we will move on to our 11th and final second reading of the evening. Ms. Eaton, you may read it whenever you're ready.
An ordinance approving the final subdivision application for South Farm Section 4 with conditions.
Move adoption.
We have a second?
seconded,
Second by Ms. Southard. All right. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Eaton, you may call the roll whenever you're ready.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
yes,
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right. That ordinance is adopted as well. All right. Thanks, everybody. We will now move on to announcements and communications, and we'll just go around the horn and start with Mr. Elliott. Doug, remember to unmute your screen.
Oh, thank you, Jessica. I wanted to comment, several council members have inquired about what we're doing to protect our citizens here. And I just wanted to share with the public, I did share information with City Council, but we take very seriously our responsibility to protect citizens and protecting them from the spread of COVID-19, community spread. In this role, of course, we rely on the Ohio Department of Health and the Butler County Health Board as well for their support and leadership in this evolving situation. So everyone has a role to play. All citizens, including students, have a role in this battle against this pandemic. And basically, we were very busy this weekend, and I wanted to share that with you. As I've said before, our fate rests in our hands. We saw the figures from the Ohio Department of Health today, and I think we're up to over 20,000 cases within the state and over 1,000 deaths. So our fate rests within our hands. As I said earlier, the police division was very busy this weekend. We did arrest one individual for violation of the health department order. We also issued a number of litter and noise citations. We find that when we go to a large gathering, a lot of times we'll just issue one citation to get things under control. And I'll share with you that over this weekend, we had 27 littering complaints, 19 noise complaints, and 6 complaints about violations of the health order, the large gatherings. And we issued 11 citations for litter and 4 for noise. And as I mentioned earlier, we had 1 arrest for violation of the health department order. You know, our goal basically is to obtain compliance before the need to make any arrests. And most individuals, most students comply with this. I also want to share that, as council knows, we have many locations where the 10 students assembled live in a unit that has a greater occupancy than 10. Our rental permit program includes 48 locations with occupancies of 10 or greater. This includes 28 fraternity houses, which have an average permitted occupancy of 46.5 persons, and 19 lodging houses with an average permitted occupancy of 12 persons. So the members of those households are exempt from the gathering prohibition of 10 or more people. I want to also chat a little bit about the businesses, because we're all familiar with the orders that have been released by the director of the Department of Health and the governor. We've had some complaints about businesses not complying with those orders. As you know, the governor issued an original order that both customers and employees needed to wear a face mask, but he decided to revise that. And now he only requires that employees wear the face mask. But I would encourage everyone, when you're out in the public, to wear a face mask. You know, what we're saying is that we care about others. As we know, it does not protect the individual, but it protects those that you're interacting with. It protects your family members. So we encourage everybody to wear a face mask. As we know, many of our retail establishments will be opening May 12th. It does not include restaurants and bars, at least seating within them. And it does not include hair salons, barbershops, and things of that. But I can share with you that, for example, one of our officers visited a restaurant and noticed that the employees didn't have masks on, checked with the Ohio Department of Health, found out that they should be, went back and shared that with them. I believe they complied with it, but they also shared with us a couple of other businesses that they felt weren't complying. And so our officer went to those 2 businesses and obtained compliance by both. One was already wearing masks and the other one wasn't. So without naming the individual businesses, we just encourage everyone to follow the governor's mandate when it comes to wearing face masks. And we all encourage everyone to wear face masks when you're out in the public and interacting with the public. I asked JJ to join us tonight in case you might have some other questions, but I applaud the police division, the work that they've been doing. This is a challenge for us, unlike other challenges that we've had. And I really think for the most part, the students are complying, but we do witness, you know, large gatherings, and we typically inquire, do you all live here? And many times they do. And if not, then they're basically asking them to break up. But JJ's department has put out information on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And of course, we do get some people that push back, that think that we're going overboard. But of course, as I think Chantel mentioned earlier, you know, I think we all believe Governor DeWine has done an outstanding job. You know, as we all know, to govern is to decide. You have to make decisions. It's really easy to protest and state your opinion. But, you know, someone has to take responsibility. And I believe Governor DeWine has done that. And I believe, you know, down the road, we'll have results that show that. But as we reopen slowly, we'll have to look at the numbers and make sure that it doesn't impact our hospitals, that we don't see the cases going up, or they might have to roll back some of those decisions. And once again, everybody should be wearing a face mask. Lastly, I'll just comment here within City Hall, we have, as of May 4th, practically all of our employees have returned to work. We have a few that are working from home a few days a week, if it's possible and feasible. We're wearing face coverings when we interact with each other. As you know, we have not opened any of the public buildings, City Hall, Parks and Recreation, Street Division, to the public. The police lobby is open to the public. And we did that. I did that because I wanted to protect our employees as we used to these new procedures. We do ask that our employees do a health assessment before they come to work, take their temperature. If they're not fit for duty, if they feel sick, have a temperature, they need to stay home. We're practicing the hand washing and physical distancing. We have the luxury in our 2 new buildings, police station and the City Hall, of having a good amount of space. So, I think we're all doing our very best, and I thank council for their support during these trying times. As a lot of people have said, we're in this together, and it is so true. So that's all I have this evening, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Chief Jones, is there anything you'd like to add tonight?
Yes, sorry. Yes, no, I'll just echo what Doug said. I think it's definitely challenging. It's something new, parties that we've always driven by before and thought that they were perfectly under control. Now, there's different rules involved, and we have to navigate those waters and try to enforce something in a constitutional and procedurally just way and balance that. So if I would just say for the public, if they see something that they think's a violation, to give us a call at our non-emergency number, 513-523-4321, and you'll speak to a dispatcher who will take the information, and an officer will respond, and then we'll get into the fine details as to whether or not that's a violation, and we'll try to educate the people there as well. For business complaints, for restaurants, things of that nature, it probably should be directed more to the health department, the Butler County General Health District. That's something that falls under their purview on an everyday basis. They have sanitarians who regularly inspect restaurants, but certainly if there's something of a urgent matter, we'll assist them, and that's what we've been doing, responding to complaints at their request as well. So I just want to also just say, just thank my staff who continue to answer these calls and adapt to ever-changing policies on literally a daily basis, whether that's an internal policy that we're issuing about whether they should wear a mask or shouldn't, or whether that's some order from the state that we've never seen before. And then we also have to process and interpret that for the public. So we often, as Doug alluded to, we put stuff out on social media to try to educate. And of course, then sometimes we get fire back for that. But I still think we're doing a good job of getting that out there. And everybody's been working through that. And again, my staff, I think, is just doing a good job with all that. So, and I think that's about it, unless anybody has questions.
All right, not seeing any questions, so thanks for that.
Wait, I have a couple of questions. May I ask questions?
Yes.
All right. It's not just, of course, a legal issue. It's a moral imperative that people protect each other. That's what we're trying to do, right? Make sure that we all remain safe. And so obviously the police can't, ticket, cite everything. But you mentioned, Chief Jones, that the health department should be alerted to businesses that don't comply, such as employees at businesses who do not wear masks. And that includes not only the small vendors, the small grocery stores, but also the large chains, right? And also the markets, the farmers market and open air things.
Mhm.
People see something like that they feel is not quite right. That vendor is or a salesperson is not using a mask. Whom should they be contacting? The police or the health department?
Right. Well, a couple of responses to that. One is I think while we are all in this together and we're all trying to protect each other, there is an individual responsibility for your own personal safety. Okay, so just like, you know, the police aren't always going to be there when that burglar breaks into your home. You have to take certain actions to protect yourself. So if you see something that you feel is would endanger you, then I would suggest leaving that area and not visiting that business or moving on if you've said something to them and they just disregard that. But for something like that, in most of the business complaints, that those would go to the Butler County General Health District. That's the health district that covers Oxford. Um, they would probably be the best suited to handle that. But then again, if they call the non-emergency police dispatch number, you know, it's something that we can also relay to the folks down at the health district and try to get an interpretation on, because sometimes we, if we don't understand the orders from the state, then we go to the local health district and try to get an interpretation on that. So there's a lot of different exceptions to the masks. There's, you know, again, like you said, there's a lot of legalistic things and then moral things. And so we're only going to deal in the legalistic issues.
And I have another question, which is, how are we working with the university to encourage them to inform students who are returning ostensibly just to gather their belongings, to make sure that students are observing some of the ways that can protect people in our community?
Sure. So for the university, there's been a lot of messaging and a lot of communication, I know, between Jessica and the folks over at the university, various statements issued, but also then on the legal side, the Office of Community Standards is who we typically deal with at the police department. And they have inquired of us and asked us, as we always do, is to provide them with the information on our citations and things like that, folks who have been arrested, because they also have to face a judicial process through the university, through the administrative law. But they've reached out to us even previous to some of our stuff, asking us for addresses and places where we're seeing reoccurring problems so that they can address it, because they may be able to address it in a different manner than we are, whereas it may not be a violation of law, it might be a violation of the student code of conduct. So so those are things that we're working with them on. But it's, you know, we got another couple weeks before all the students, I hope, you know, I think will really clear out. So I think obviously weather is a factor for us too. And so if we see some nice days, which I'm all about seeing some nice days soon, but certainly, you know, that gets more people out and we see more gatherings, and does become a little more challenging for us.
Would you like to add anything to that, Ms. Green?
No, I mean, JJ covered it all. It's just that we've been in communication with the Dean of Students and the President's office to communicate both to parents and students. So I think we're trying to cover all bases.
I appreciate that you're having this discussion, because there are many citizens who have had questions and have concerns. Those who are permanent residents particularly have, you know, they're very concerned about their health and the health of their friends and neighbors. So thank you for your responses and your very good work.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Chief Jones? All right, seeing none, I was going to go back to Mrs. Green to see if she had any comments for tonight.
Nothing further this evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We will go around the horn. Ms. Eaton, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to our law director, Mr. Kennard. Any comments?
Briefly, I want to be clear about something. There's been some confusion about when public bodies should return to in-person meetings. And under House Bill 197, that the exception to in-person meetings is in effect under that law until December this year. So there is flexibility. I think that the idea is there's no rush to go back to in-person meetings, taking into account all of those things that start with safety and the comfort of the people who are on the committees, the elected officials, and the public. And the second thing I do want to say is there's been a lot of discussion, not just in Oxford, but across the state about masks. One of the reasons for the confusion is that on 3 separate days, the governor came out with 3 separate sets of rules. And I think that has led to confusion among the public about what the requirements are. And I think that there's been plenty of discussion about that functionally. The wear a mask at the workplace. Businesses have the option to require customers and visitors to wear masks, but it certainly is the best practice that people should wear masks, not just to save their own lives, but to save the lives of others, more importantly. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you. Mr. Perry, is there anything you need to add tonight?
Just for the public's benefit, I was going to add that just today we changed the meeting format, kind of in that vein. For Planning Commission and BZA will be virtual meetings for May, and HAPC has been canceled. So those are just recent updates I wanted to pass along.
Okay.
And PACA will also be, the Public Arts Commission will also be virtual. Is that correct?
It will, Edna, if I have the agenda in time.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
I'm seeing a hand from Chief Jones.
Yes, Your Honor. I just thought I would mention when speaking on meetings on Thursday night, May 14th, I think we are looking at having a virtual police community relations and review commission meeting. It's not on the agenda, but we just heard back from the chairman, and I think he wants to hold a virtual meeting. So that's Thursday, May 14th at 7 p.m.
Okay, great. All right, we'll continue around the horn. Councilor Ragu, do you have any announcements tonight?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. With the pandemic, it's only highlighted how important all of our work has been, whether you're administrative or as a counselor. And I think the 2 key things, especially with something that is an infectious disease, is that we're only as strong as a society as our most vulnerable. So those that are financially insecure, those that are experiencing homelessness, those that are in detention centers, undocumented Americans, we are all in this together, like it's been said so many different times, and that it's highlighting how our work should be addressing those vulnerabilities because we are all being touched by it. And the other thing too is about sustainability, because with this specific coronavirus, although we don't know the origin, we know that the way that we interact with the environment is of utmost importance, whether it's from a pangolin that has been trafficked for different purposes, or it's from a bat source. We know that it is human interaction, inappropriately so, with the environment that has released this onto our human species. So whenever we look for everything that we are working towards, whether it's solar panels, or trying to be as sustainable as possible, it highlights that our status quo is no longer an option. So we should do everything we can on a local level to make sure that we are making progress to correct our previous mistakes and make sure something like this doesn't happen again.
All right. Mr. Ellerby.
Yeah, I'd just like to say happy Cinco de Mayo to everybody. And I want to echo the sentiments that Doug and Chief Jones talked about. Really want to say, just be considerate of each other and understand that Like Chief said, every time that you go out in public, you're risking your life. So you can make that choice whether or not you want to put on that mask, but the mask is protection, and it's protection for you as well as those around you. And I would wholeheartedly recommend that you try to be as considerate as you can to your fellow man. And I'm really looking forward to talking about Hornets next month.
All right. Vice Mayor Snavely.
Yeah, I've got 4 quick things. I want to echo the comments of the city manager and indicate that this is coming up as move out and graduation weekend for Miami. And so it's especially important that Oxford residents are attentive and following the rules of social distancing with so many out-of-town visitors. And so we should be staying clear of them as much, well, we probably would anyway, but to try and stay as clear as possible from them and be vigilant. I've had conversations with some of our local business owners, some of whom are restaurant owners, and they're looking forward to being able to open quickly and safely. But if we allow the virus to get going in town, then that's going to delay their opening, and it's going to delay all of our small businesses from being able to operate the way they would like to. So that was a specific plea that was passed along to me to please bring up to the public if we can. Second, I want to give a big congratulations to the graduates from Talawanda and from Miami. This is not how you thought your graduation was going to be. I do think that you will remember your graduation as bizarre as this time is, but please know that the City of Oxford congratulates you. We are very proud of you, and we're thinking about you on these weekends coming up. Third is the Kiwanis Food Drive. I'm a member of Kiwanis. I'm very happy to be participating, and if you have food available, especially if you happen to have tuna or some toilet paper, there is a process by which you can drop by at the Family Resource Center out on College Corner Pike with your food donations Thursday of this week from 1 to 3 p.m. So if you have those things that you can spare, if you're a little bit more fortunate, let's help out some of our fellow citizens who are not so fortunate, and put together a bag or a box of food that you can share. So it's 1 to 3 p.m. Thursday, the 7th of May at the Family Resource Center. And finally, I want to thank Jessica, who, because I had computer problems again, was kind enough to make her space available. And we've been putting these up and pulling them down, and having this available to me. It was appreciated, and I know it's a burden on her, and she's always, as you can know, very gracious and very helpful. So thank you very much.
All right. Councillor Southard.
Yeah, I wanted to take a moment to urge you to support the Postal Service, the United States Postal Service. Since, like you, I can't visit people, including my grandchildren, I'm sending books, packages, small packages, letters and cards to them and to other people. And I hope you'll join me in supporting the United States Postal Service. Communication is a big issue. It's so needed. We need the post offices, and they need our support now. Nearly half of the Postal Service workers are people of color, and they handle nearly half of the mail in the entire world. Service, as you know, has been uninterrupted. You and I have received mail without stop. My mail carrier is appropriately named Joy, even though she occasionally brings me bills. But our local office, our local post office for 45056 on Brown Road is actually one of the safest places in town, people are saying. They're adhering very well to the governor's recommendations for safety and health. The Postal Service workers maintain an efficient, courteous, clean, and safe operation, and I think they should be celebrated and highly valued for their excellent work. And I'm very alarmed and concerned that there is talk about the Postal Service being bankrupt by June. So the message at our local post office is that they care about your health and well-being. The workers are protected. The customers stay 6 feet apart. Most people wear face masks. I mean, most customers wear face masks, not everybody, but most do. The building is cleaned and is cleaned regularly. And I see the postal workers cleaning the doors as you enter. So, you know, it's very impressive. And I just wanted to really have a shout out to them. All establishments should remember that as we were talking a moment ago, all establishments need to remember that we are customers who have choices. If I get the message, and I'm sure you agree, that an organization or a business cares more about my health than my money, I'll shop there. I know that you also will support the post office, local businesses, and national chains that demonstrate that they care for everyone's health. And if they don't, we're going to vote with our feet and we're not going to go there. So the guidelines they follow are more than a legal imperative. They're really a moral and ethical imperative, an ethical choice. The choice is to care about each other, about you and me, and it's about the vulnerable populations, as you have pointed out, but it's also about all of us, including the elderly, the senior citizens who live here, who are also among the most vulnerable, most of whom, by the time they reach senior citizens age, have either an underlying condition that puts them at a vulnerable, gives them a vulnerability, or an active disease. And so we really do need to protect each other and do the best we can to think about each other. And I hope that reminder, I know you're all working so hard to make that happen, but we need to remind our visitors that they have a responsibility to care for the people who live here long-term. And not everything can be legal. As I said, sometimes it's just a reminder or some way to remind people to care about each other, because we do care. And I think that this city shows that it cares. This community shows that it cares, but we've got to make sure that we continue to take care of each other. So a shout out to the post office and to sending letters and cards to people you care about. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Councilor Bracken?
I wouldn't be adding anything that my peers didn't already cover. So for the sake of brevity, that'll be all. Thank you.
All right. I will keep my remarks brief as well. Continued thanks to the city staff for again setting up our new virtual norm. We will be virtual for the second meeting in May, and then we will evaluate June when we get there. I too am going to make a request about everybody wearing masks. I know we've had some concerns. Oxford has a large vulnerable population, and even though you do not think you're vulnerable yourself, wearing a mask protects Oxford's most vulnerable. So I really want to see more masks in stores and grocery stores when I'm around town. Here's my favorite red polka dot mask. This is the one I wear. Wait, I'm seeing a hand.
David Frithurch probably would like to say something.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me, David. Go ahead.
No, were you done, Mayor?
Yes, I'm done.
I just, two things just as an update, and Jessica can provide additional information. I wanted to thank Jessica, the CIC, the finance department, that the small business stimulus gift card purchase checks have been going out this week. I think this is, as you guys are aware, there was kind of like an initial round of $2,000 per eligible applicant, and the CIC will meet again to determine for those people who request more, then that might be scaled more to the business. So the CIC will be meeting again. And so I'm really super thankful to staff and the CIC for moving forward so quickly on that. And so the other thing is just on the matter of the face masks, and I hope we can exhort people to do it. Ohio cases of COVID are on the rise again. Maybe that's because of testing. But I've had neighbors ask me the question, can the city not require, can a municipality not require people to wear face masks, the customers? I know other communities have waded into that territory and it's messy. But I guess I would ask that we start thinking of ways, on the assumption that COVID will be a relatively long-term thing we're gonna have to deal with. What proactive thing, because the students will go, but I'm seeing a lot of customers not wearing them. And I'm wondering whether we can work with our Chamber of Commerce, whether we can start with some education, because I think that I wish the governor's orders had been more firm, and I don't want to be in the position of enforcing, but I think that, my hope is we can take a proactive strategy on that. So anyway, that's all I had to add.
All right, very good. All right, I'm hoping that we are seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. So everybody, please keep up your social distancing in the next few weeks. And we will see you all virtually on May 19th. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Savely, seconded by Ms. Southard. Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Did Bill say his final comment?
I did.
Did you? Okay, I'm sorry, I missed it. Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes. Remember the Kiwanis food drive. Yeah.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right, we are adjourned. Great meeting, everyone. I look forward to seeing you all in person again someday.
Be safe.
Be safe.
Good night, everyone.